What's cooking?
Special bell peppers and beef.
Magic has a plethora of commanders to choose from, and the play experiences they bring always create unique interactions that provide a rich playing experience. However, most older commanders lack a level of effectiveness and struggle to keep up with the growing power creep of new commanders. Firstly, I'd like to clarify what could be identified as a strong commander, also known as its potential. Like I said in my previous video, I hate strong cards. I identified that a strong card usually floods the board in resource gain and board presence, along with its ability being broad enough to apply to multiple archetypes. The same can be applied to a commander's potential. Not only that, I like to add an additional point to this idea: synergy. In my opinion, in commander terms, synergy is the melding of two or more cards to complete a designed goal for the game. For example, Atraxa, Praetor's Voice, has a lot of synergy with many different strategies and archetypes. To say the least, due to Atraxa's synergy, it's hard not to recognize the potential that Atraxa has. For a more recent example with the Bloomborough set, Miss Bubbleflower is a commander that has an incredible amount of potential. For Miss Bubbleflower, she has the ability to pertain to multiple different archetypes, that being card draw, plus encounters, and even group hug. She gives tons of value for an immediate effect on the board. Along with large toughness, she can be used as a blocker and sometimes an even confident attacker with vigilance and her ability to grant flying. All around, due to her excellent resource gain, board presence, and synergy with many other cards, Miss Bubbleflower has a lot of commander potential. Before we continue, however, I need to explain something that I have mentioned before: a card's immediate effectiveness on the board. A cost/caveat to playing some of these powerful commanders is their ability can only be used the turn after, or it requires the use of another ability to really make it go off. These are what I like to call a panharmonicon of commanders. These cards look amazing on their own, because they are able to double the something that pertains to an archetype that you have chosen. However, these commanders require other cards to work, so they can easily falter. With their ability being broadcasted before the game, all it takes is a smart player to look over and make sure to hold up some sort of interaction to make the deck's plan fall through. However, it must be said that some of these cards can be done correctly to have an immediate effect, such as playing them on a later turn or setting up the board before enacting their strategy. With all that being said, I want to use the new commanders for Duskmourn, House of Horror as an example. I will be gauging them for potential based off the categories I have already listed before. Firstly is Winter, Cynical Opportunist. An often forgotten resource that can be used in Magic is the graveyard. It can fuel most decks that use it to turn into powerhouse machines that are hard to slow down and stop. Although he cannot generate an immediate effect by filling the graveyard, he does have an end of turn ability that causes him to bring back a free permanent of any kind from the graveyard by exiling 4 or more other card types. So, when it comes to his immediate presence and effectiveness, he lacks considerably without prep. By filling your graveyard with a couple of spells and permanents from earlier turn, you are able to cast them on turn 4 and get some immediate compensation at the end of the turn. When it comes to his synergy, the graveyard archetype is nothing to laugh at. It isn't hard to fill the graveyard with enough permanents and spells before turn 4 and cast him, especially in Golgari. He also does not specify the type of permanent he brings back, therefore it allows the use of some strategies that one may not think of at first. When it comes to his board presence, I would rate him a solid 7 out of 10. Getting a free, expensive permanent right after casting him can lead to an explosive turn 4. For his synergy with the graveyard archetype, I'll do an 8 out of 10. This is mainly due to Golgari being an excellent color combination for a graveyard strategy. Lastly, when it comes to his ability to give a resource to you, I would say 3 cards in the graveyard per attack is pretty generic. 7 out of 10. It wouldn't be surprising to see him recover after a board wipe so easily due to his ability, so I'd want to watch out before casting any board wipes. Next up would be Zimone, Mystery Unraveler. Zimone, like many other Simic commanders, basically deals out a free big creature and even free big enchantments and artifacts if it suits you. When it comes to resource pumping, Zimone rewards Simic players for doing the bare minimum of 2 lands a turn. To quote another MTG figure,
you play a land, which means you now have more mana, and you do a cool thing? No way, bro. That is a Ponzi scheme. My mom warned me about y'all. I'm not falling for it.
However, when it comes to her immediate effectiveness, like Winter, she requires some amount of preparation before casting her. Green already has a lot of spells and permanents that let you play 1 or 2 extra lands per turn, so there isn't a hassle there. With some extra effort, you can even play a pseudo spellslinger deck where you search your library for 2 lands on every player's turn to maximize the uses of her ability, thus producing a level of resources akin to Smothering Tithe and Rhystic Study. And when it comes to her synergy, there's no other colors I would rather be in for a landfall strategy. Overall, I feel Zimone doesn't push the bounds of Cynical, however, she does offer a beginner-friendly vibe that has room for creativity. Overall, when it comes to her immediate board presence, Zimone gives the same amount of effort as Winter, so I'll give her a 7 out of 10. When it comes to her synergy with Landfall, it's hard to landfall short. So I'll give her a 10 out of 10. And with her ability to give some sort of resource, it's pretty easy to say that she gets a 9 out of 10. A free body per land is pretty neat, although it's just limited to once per turn. Aminatou Veil Piercer takes the Enchantress archetype and flips it on its head. On a first glance, Aminatou lacks a level of immediate effectiveness that her other pre-constructed commanders have. That being, she has to wait an entire turn cycle before being able to utilize her ability. Like the previous two, with enough preparation, she can have a semi-immediate effect. At best, you will have 1 to 4 extra mana left over after casting her, and even some sort of card draw on the opponent's turn to utilize her miracle ability. When it comes to her potential resource gain, she has nothing to scoff at. She lets you play enchantments 4 turns early and in troves, as she allows you to cast multiple in a turn due to the cost reduction. And when it comes to her synergies, Enchantress decks are one of the stronger kinds of archetypes, and due to her uniqueness, I wouldn't be surprised if she became a new face card for the Enchantress archetype in Esper. What makes her a total steal in my book is her ability to do well with the top deck archetype, as it's finally nice for a commander to utilize the miracle feature. For her immediate effectiveness, I put her at a 4 out of 10. It's pretty easy to recognize that she requires too much preparation before she can do anything. For her resource generation, I give her a 9 out of 10 due to how powerful of a board state you can create so early. And lastly, I give her synergy a solid 7 out of 10. I predict her precon will contain some really big enchantment and enchantment creatures that she can cheat out with her ability. Rakdos is one of my favorite color combinations, which makes it no less surprising to say that Valgavoth, Harrower of Souls, is one of my favorite precon commanders to date before the decklist gets released. Compared to other pre-constructed commanders in the past, Valgavoth is very simple in design. Even though his ability has the caveat of only triggering during an opponent's turn, Rakdos has some cards that you can use in troves that enable this strategy. This effectively turns Valgavoth into an immediate threat through 1 turn cycle after casting him. You're able to get him to a 7/7 beater and draw 3 cards before your next untap step. And when it comes to his resource generation, Valgavoth beats others in a landslide. Even though he doesn't generate a large board state like the others, I like to consider card draw to be one of the stronger resource gains, as the more cards you have in your hand, the more answers you have access to. And with how I assume the deck will be built, utilizing upkeep pingers will allow Valgavoth to trigger easily. He will be an immediate card draw engine that you can progressively grow bigger in strength each turn cycle. Lastly, when it comes to his synergy, I feel as though he is lacking the most. That being, he can only fit in a group slug deck. If you wish to capitalize on his ability the most, you need to pack the deck full of a decent amount of pingers to abuse his ability. Therefore, it doesn't offer much room for other fancy and creative strategies. On a side note, even though it's clear that he can do well in a group slug setting, offering a large amount of card draw and being a big beater, he cannot branch out, and therefore, in my opinion, it draws down his ability to synergize with other strategies. When it comes to his immediate board presence, I give him a 10 out of 10. His growing power will be easy to notice, and not only that, he requires only 1 other card to be fully online. And for his resource generation, I give him a 9 out of 10, due to his ability only being once each turn, which can be pretty limiting and impossible to stack. And for his synergy, I can only offer him a 4 out of 10. In other terms, his synergy with the group slug archetype would be around 8 out of 10, since it doesn't really offer any group slug abilities, but it does offer a lot of profit. Now that we've looked at commanders with great potential, I would like to discuss the key differences between a commander that is strong and has potential, and a commander that requires a lot of support. Generally speaking, all commanders either support or are supported by the deck that it's built around, and you should view the commander as a face card that pertains to what the deck does. The fight between Kumena, Tyrant of Oriska, and Hackball of the Surging Soul is a great example of a strong and high potential commander versus a commander that needs a lot of support. When it comes to Hackball, he has an immediate effect on the field, allowing you to explore equal to the amount of merfolk you have at the beginning of combat. For merfolk, it isn't that hard to have at least 1 or 2 on the field before you cast Hackball, and thus, this allows you to give a semi-buff / land gain just by having him on the field for a pretty neat static effect. Secondly, Hackball gives you at least 1 of 2 kinds of resources based on an attack, and even gives you a choice to pick which. Since you are basically scrying equal to the amount of creatures you have, you are able to rearrange the top card of your deck and the cards you have in your hand before he attacks, giving you a cool kind of synergy with himself that even fuels his self-sufficiency as an engine. This gives both an immediate effect on a commander and a sustained buff and resource generator on a later turn. Lastly, he is able to synergize semi-well with other archetypes, the big caveat being that you need to have merfolk as the main strategy and use other strategies as a sub-archetype. However, Kumena has its own strengths. Like elves, merfolk generate a large field before swimming in, and Kumena does this by using those untapped merfolk you have on the field. He can give himself evasion for a possible commander-based kill in conjunction with his other buffing ability, and in ideal circumstances he can generate a large amount of card draw that can win the game. However, unlike Hackball, he lacks any immediate effects that can change the board state, and along with this, he can't generate any resources or buffs by himself, thus, he relies on earlier played turns in a proper board state before being cast. And, like many other commanders, he is subject to power creep as he is outdone by a new similar commander, Balin the Haymaker. Whereas Hackball requires merfolk, token or not, on the field before casting him, Balin is able to use any token that's on the field to push his strategy. Not only that, it's much easier to generate a large amount of tokens in general than it is to generate a large amount of merfolk and Simic. Lastly, unlike Hackball, it is very difficult to work outside the merfolk archetype to support him as a commander. Even though shapeshifters exist and you can technically do Voltron, it's very hard to work with Kumena as a commander than it is to work with Hackball. I would also like to say that neither are weak by themselves, and each can be excellent commanders, but for the sake of this video and keeping up with the guidelines I've laid out previously, one is better than the other by a pretty significant landslide. Whenever you're browsing for a new commander, ask yourself this: how can I utilize this creature's strengths? What does it give me and my deck? What is something cool that I want to do with this commander? And lastly, and most importantly, how can I have fun running this commander? There have been many videos that say a deck should not revolve around the commander, and that if you do such, your deck can easily be shut down. While they are correct in their assessments and make a compelling point, remember that this format is meant to have a unique feature of having a creature that you can call your commander. Every weakness that is presented with that commander can be overcome with ingenuity and creativity.
Are you listening to me?
There's no beef in here. So you wouldn't really call it bell peppers and beef, now would you?
Yes, I would.
Well, it's not!